Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into a really complex and, honestly, often misunderstood religious tradition. And we're going to do it through the eyes of scholar Ebrahim Moosa and his fantastic article, Norms in the Madrasa-Sphere, where he really unpacks the inner world of the Deoband School.
So for a lot of people, especially after 9/11, the name Deoband became famous for pretty much one reason: its connection to the Taliban. And it's true, key Taliban leaders did study at Deobandi schools. But here's the thing: reducing this massive global tradition to just that one connection, well, that's a huge oversimplification. It's just a tiny piece of a much, much bigger story.
And that right there is exactly the point Ebrahim Moosa is making. He basically says, look, if we really want to understand the Deobandi movement, we have to get past the headlines. We have to explore its internal logic, its own story about who it is and what it stands for. Okay, so let's dive in. So this brings us to the big question. If the Deoband tradition isn't just a political movement, then what on earth is it?
Moosa asks us to just throw out our usual categories for a minute. He offers a totally different way of thinking about this global network.
And his choice of words here is just brilliant. He calls it a franchise. Think about that. This isn't about controlling territory or a country. It's about a shared ethical and moral operating system that can be set up and run pretty much anywhere in the world.
So this shared operating system, it has a name, the maslak. And Moosa connects this to this cool concept from legal theory called a nomos. See, it's not just a rule book. It's the whole universe of stories, history, and values that makes the rules make sense in the first place. It's the why behind the what, you know?
All right, so how do you actually build a universe of meaning like this maslak? To figure that out, we're going to look at the work of a really important Deobandi thinker, Qari Muhammad Tayyab. He was the head of the main seminary in India for a long, long time. Now, for Tayyab, tradition isn't some dusty old thing sitting on a shelf. No way. He believed it has to be renewed to face the challenges of the modern world. But, and this is a huge but, he argued that any real change has to strictly follow what he called the prophetic pedagogy. Basically, the balanced and moderate way of teaching and learning that was set by the Prophet Muhammad himself. He lays out these three pillars, right? And they all work together. You start by committing to that prophetic model. Then you master the core principles of the tradition, and finally, and this is the absolute key, you learn it all through a direct personal apprenticeship. And honestly, this third pillar, Sobat, this is the heart of the whole thing. For Deobandis, you can't just get true knowledge from a book. It has to be passed down through a deep, personal, living relationship with a teacher who actually embodies the tradition. This quote from Tayyab just hits the nail on the head. A book is just ink on a page, right? But a true teacher, they perform the book for you. Through their character, their actions, their whole way of being, they bring the text to life in a way a student could never get just by reading on their own. And these are just a few examples, right? Tayyab lists 31 of these universal maxims or axioms. These are the big bedrock principles. Things like do no harm, all believers are a brotherhood, that a scholar has to completely internalize before they can even think about interpreting the law. Okay, so that's the theory. That's the blueprint. But what happens when this whole system, this maslak, slams into the messy, complicated real world? And Moosa gives us these two incredible case studies. They couldn't be more different, but both of them really put the Deobandi maslak to the test in some really revealing ways. So on one hand, you've got this really modern kind of technical economic question about bank interest, or riba, which is normally a big no-no. And on the other, you have this heartbreakingly personal and tragic case of a woman named Imrana, a victim of a horrific crime that created a huge legal crisis. So in both cases, the head honchos at the main Deoband seminary in India weigh in. For the South Africa question, they pull out this classical legal category of an abode of hostility and say, because of that, taking interest is permissible. For Imrana, they stick to a very strict reading of the law about sexual contact in a family and rule that her marriage is now void. But here, this is where it gets really fascinating. The local responses could not be more different. The South African scholars totally push back. They say, no, our country is an abode of safety, and the Quran's direct ban on interest is more important. But in India, when faced with public outrage over the Imrana ruling, the authorities just dig in their heels, defend their decision, and attack anyone who criticizes them. And what these two cases show us, side by side, is a tradition that's in real tension with itself.
It's a system that's capable of being nuanced and pragmatic in one situation, and then in the next breath, it can be rigid, almost brutally technical.
So, what's the big picture here? What can we learn from all this about the Deobandi world, and really about any living tradition trying to make its way in the 21st century?
Well, at its very best, their whole system of legal reasoning, which is called thick, isn't supposed to be about just applying cold, hard rules. It's meant to be this deep, insightful understanding that connects the law with a person's conscience.
But then you see a case like Imrana's, and that same system of fiqh can feel like brutal technical reason, where a rule is enforced with this thunderous authority that seems completely cut off from human compassion. And this is so important. The South Africa case shows us that the tradition has a built-in self-correction mechanism. It shows that this authority can be challenged from the inside by people arguing that the law has to serve a higher purpose, justice.
Moosa brings in this incredible literary quote to really get at the heart of this dilemma. It describes someone who is in love not with people, but with principles, ideas, webs of reasoning. It's about being in love with the idea of the law itself, maybe sometimes even more than the actual people it's supposed to serve.
And this brings us to the key takeaway. It's not really about us, on the outside, judging who was right or wrong. Moosa's point is that it's way more significant to understand the process, to see how they argue, how they justify their positions, and how they debate with each other. That's where the real story is.
And all of this leaves us with this huge universal question. And it's not just about the Deoband School, is it? It's a challenge that every living tradition, every community, every belief system has to face. How do you stay true to your history and your principles, while also answering the urgent calls for justice and compassion right here, right now?